Hey everybody, this is Seth Parnell, the minister at the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 90 of the Midweek Bible Study. I hope that you're doing well. Hope things are going good for you. It's been a beautiful 60-degree day here in Jonesboro, and so I hope you've had a wonderful day in your own right. We want to let you know that we always appreciate you being here. We always appreciate you joining us for the study, and we hope it's something that benefits you. We always want to, at the beginning of our shows, we always want to extend you an invitation. If you're someone that is around the Portia area, I hope that you come by and see us sometime. Right now, we are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning and 6 o'clock on Sunday night and Wednesday night. And so if you're in our area, we hope that you come by and see us sometime. We would love to visit with you. We would love to worship with you and get to know you. And so we hope that you can take advantage of that if you are in our area. Also, if you are someone that has questions or comments about what we talk about tonight, or if you have suggestions for a future episode, then please feel free to send that my way as well. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear what you think about these episodes, and we like to cover things that will give you some benefit. And so, hope you know that you have that available to you as well. But also, we have several events that are coming up in our area. We have an area-wide singing at the O'Kane Church of Christ on Saturday. It starts at 6 o'clock, and so if you're in that area, hopefully you can check that out. But also tomorrow at 6 o'clock, there is going to be a debate at the Centennial Hall at ASU. It's going to be a debate that is centered on baptism. And it's going to be between Brock Kendall and Jeremiah Nordier. Brock Kendall used to preach at the Nettleton Church of Christ, and now he is at the Harrisburg Church of Christ. And they're going to be debating. The proposition is the New Testament teaches that liberty from the penalty of past sins is at the point of an external act of obedience, which is essentially a discussion on salvation. How do we obtain salvation? Is baptism involved in salvation, or is it something that is just by grace or by faith alone? This is going to be taking place tomorrow at 6 o'clock, and so if you've never been to a debate, then I encourage you to check it out, and because it'll be I think it'll be very interesting. It'll be a good thing to see. I've personally never been to a debate before, and so I'm excited to check it out. It's located, if you look down here, it's located at Centennial Hall. It's at the third floor of the Student Union, and it's on North Caraway Road in Jonesboro, Arkansas. So hopefully you can take a look at that if you're in our area, and if you'd like to see a debate on baptism. I believe Jeremiah Nordier is from the 12-5 church. He's of the Baptist faith, and of course, Brock has been a member of the church for a long time. So I think it'll be interesting. So if you're in our area, hopefully you can check that out. But tonight we are going to be taking a look at Daniel chapter 3. But we have a special guest with us here tonight. We have with us Easton Cook. He is going to be with us, and he is joining us for our Bible study tonight. I know that you're going to enjoy what he has to say. We went to school together, back in the CRC days, and I know you're going to enjoy his perspective, on the story that we read here in Daniel chapter 3. So, Easton, it's good to have you here tonight. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, yeah, thanks so much for having me. So like you said, we went to school back at Crowley's Ridge College, and then after that I went to Harding University, got a Bible degree there, and a marketing minor, ended up becoming a flight attendant for a major U.S. airline, and so that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years or so. While I also run a podcast and a YouTube channel on the side, I do Everything with Easton, which I basically tie in everyday life to Bible events in the past, because I feel like sometimes we take stories from the Bible and we don't ever apply them to our actual lives at the time, especially like, for example, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. No one's really being thrown into the fiery furnace these days. So it's, taking what happened then and applying it to really what's happening now. And that's kind of the theme of the podcast. And then also on my YouTube channel, just basically helping out people who want to be a flight attendant, And that's kind of where I've been lately. I currently live in Denver, Colorado. I change states about every 4 months, and that's life right now.
Yeah, you've been in Florida and New York and all over the
My
world.
goodness, yeah.
And you used to work at the Bernie Church of Christ.
I did, yeah. I was a youth minister at the Bernie Church of Christ for about 2.5 years. And then I was actually a youth intern at West Side Church of Christ in Memphis, Tennessee. So I did that for a little bit, yeah. And then of course, Crowley's Ridge College, they sent us to preach every Sunday. So I preach at these smaller congregations here and there.
Yeah, we love being in that preacher program at CRC. You never know where you're going to go, but it's
absolutely true.
It was, I know, at least on my end, it was a very good experience.
It was a great experience. It was great.
What have you been studying on lately?
So lately, what I've been taking, so this is Daniel chapter 3 is actually a big one that I've been studying on lately. And this is actually one of my favorite, chapters and also verses in the Bible. There's a phrase I really like in there that we'll get into a little bit later. But recently, I've actually been going through Acts chapter by chapter, because I just got through the Gospels, and I'm just kind of, taking it slow. I thought about doing Bible in a year, where I just basically went through everything, but I found that I wasn't absorbing the material. Instead, I was trying to reach the goal of getting past and just saying I did it, and that didn't work for me, which is why now I'm going very slow, chapter by chapter, and actually absorbing what I read. So, yeah.
Yeah, that can be a big problem sometimes when you're trying to take in the enormity, you might say, of the information that the Bible has, and
for sure,
you just got to slow down and take something that can actually be useful.
Yes.
So I think that's a great approach.
Well, thank you.
And also, if you're wondering if Easton is a true Christian, he's wearing a Miami Dolphins t-shirt right now, and so
there it is.
You can be assured for that.
That's right. It's actually a ticket into heaven, I believe. It's found in Jeremiah 23, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you're right. But it is great to have you here tonight, and we're going to jump into our study. We have right. Janet has chimed in here. She says that she is watching. She's a frequent listener, and we appreciate you being here. Hope things are going good for you on your end. But the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is something that it's not unknown. It's a story that it's often told in Bible classes. It's often sometimes as a preacher, I know that I preached on it several times. It's something that it kind of sticks in your mind because of the type of story that it is. This is a story that brings forth some, you might say, some dynamic elements. We have these people standing before the king, and they really defy his authority. They defy what he wants them to do at a great cost. And you think of something in the sense of a movie or something of that sense. This is a scene that kind of speaks to that, because of when you try to picture it in your mind, you think of these men standing there, and there's no one backing them up. There's no safety net in this situation. They are just doing what they think is right. And so
yes,
it's a very like I said, a very dynamic story that we read. But what are your first thoughts when you read this story? When you read throughout Daniel chapter 3 and you think on this story, what are some first things that come to mind?
Yeah, so first things that come to mind with me is I when I first heard the story, of course, everyone focuses very, very closely on the fact that there was a fiery furnace. I'm talking like you're literally going to be thrown into a furnace and burned to death. I mean, that's the thing that most people think of. And also the fact that what in the world, like King Nebuchadnezzar makes this giant statue of gold and all these precious metals and requires everyone to fall down and worship it at the sound of this music, and I've always found that kind of weird. I'm like, living in today's time, a lot of people's God can be social media or getting likes on a post, or it could just even be their job. There's a million things that can stand in the place of God. And in this particular story, it was a gigantic statue that was full of precious metals. And so it took a long time to finally relate that as far as understanding why in the world why in the world would you make a statue and then make people worship it? But I mean, in today's time, people are doing that all the time. And so that kind of really stood out to me. And then also, I'll be honest, like when I think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're three guys, and it's like first of all, standing up for what they believe in is amazing. And I think that's a big theme of the story. But also, the more I read it, the more I was like, I don't think it's about bravery. Because I feel like a lot of people would look at it and be like, wow, they were so brave looking at the fire and still saying, I'm going to stand with God. I feel like it was more so about trusting God than it was about their own bravery. Because at first I thought, oh, it's bravery. Like, holy cow, like to look at the fire and say, no problem, I'll jump in. That's brave. But I don't know if it's necessarily what that was. I mean, as far as we know, they were shaking and terrified, but also they trusted God more than their own fear. And I think that is almost the theme of the story. And I think we can get lost in the, like you said, the dynamics of it, because it is like a movie, and you're looking at it like, holy cow, we're not faced with that today. Right. The hardest part of our day is maybe getting a driver's license when it expires, or maybe, our key doesn't work in our car all of a sudden and we can't seem to get it to, or just to start. And it's like they were literally facing death just for simply not doing something that the king commanded. And they could have feared and just done it, but they trusted God instead. I feel like that is one of the main themes, honestly, of this story.
That's something that I put down as well. Because when I was writing down my notes for this, I first wrote down, they showed no fear.
Right.
And then I started to think about it, and I thought, well, that might not be an accurate depiction of what happened. I mean, we weren't there.
Right.
We can't really say for sure, but I imagine being human, they were scared. They may have been terrified, but
yes.
Because it'd be hard not to, when you think of the situation that they were in. Not only was there the social pressure of complying, but there was also the fear of the consequences of being made an example of, publicly. And so that it really is a sense of the trust in God overriding everything else, and then that's what they put their anchor in, and that's what carried them through. And that
Absolutely.
they could have been scared. They could have been, terrified of what happened, but they didn't let that override their trust in God. And I think
yes,
that's like you said, I think that's a big theme of the story. But we have a couple of more people that have joined in with us. We have the Dunlaps are here. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope everything's going good your way. And Anita Cook is here with us as well.
Hey, that's my grandma.
Hey. It's good to have you here. But when we look at these men and look at what they stood for, what are some things that we need to know about these men? What are some things that we can gather from who they were, what they did? These are people that don't have a whole lot of time in the scriptures. We don't have like for instance in the story of David, we have a long narrative of who David was and his ups and downs and things of the sort. But with these men, there's a limited amount of information. But what are some things that we need to know about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego?
So as I did the review and as I thought about it, and I kind of looked over it, one of the things is very clear is that they're Jewish men, right? Because this is what the government officials and basically all these higher ups go to the king and say, hey, there's some Jewish men here who are not partaking in your law, which again it's another wild thing to think about. Holy cow, like they were lawbreakers, right? I mean, they broke the law. The law was to worship. They did not worship. But they were Jewish men, and that's almost enough to understand who they are, because the Jewish custom is very, it's strict, right? Especially if we're talking about Old Testament law, it's very strict. They had very well, I keep saying strict, but procedures where they had to follow, and also they put their religion above everything, even their own lives. And so as far as genealogies, or as far as who they were and where did they come from, that's almost as far as the Bible's concerned, as far as the story's concerned, the story's about God. So it almost makes where they came from irrelevant, because they were Jewish men who put God above all else. And that is what I took away from it, is I'm like, these men they put God above even their own lives. And that's the takeaway from who they are. You know what I mean? That's for me, that's what I took away from who these men were.
Yeah, they were people. They were part of the exile. They were members. Like I said, they were Jewish men. But and a question that comes after this, when talking about the the world in which they lived in, we know that Israel at this time, it didn't exist. They had been conquered by Babylon, and they had been carried away into exile. And this is the world in which Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel lived in. And they were and while it was they were living in a foreign land, and there was challenges with that, they were actually doing pretty good. They were
pretty well.
They were put in positions of power. And of course, there's another story preceding this, talking about how they behaved themselves, and how they were how they responded to what the king offered them. And so you get a sense of their character pretty early on. But they, like I said, they were people who were they were administrative servants. We know that they were a friend of Daniel. Daniel is, of course, a very well-known character in the story as well. And ultimately, they were servants of God. They were children of God, and that ultimately plays the biggest part in the story. But one thing I know, and I know you have experience, like you said, living in different places. You being a flight attendant, you've traveled a lot. What are some challenges of maybe being in a foreign land, or being in a place that is not your home? We know that this wasn't a land that was Israel's home, and so there had to be some challenges with that.
Yeah, absolutely. One is the language, right? I mean, so, whether you go to, Amsterdam, Iceland, China, you go to all these different places, the language barrier is always one. Now, don't get me wrong. Most places speak a decent amount of English, just like I imagine they could communicate just fine to an extent. But language barriers are always a thing when you travel and you go to another land. Also, the laws are different, so you have to find the respect of that law. But also, I mean, does that law fight against your personal beliefs, and also who you are as a person, who you are as one of God's children? And so that's also an issue. So you try and respect the laws as much as possible, which I believe Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did in this story. They tried to as much as possible, and then once the it hit the wall, it was like, okay, we cannot go any further. In the story, I mean, I'll kind of translate it back to that, is they even showed the king respect. O king, live forever. Like they respected his throne, and they still, even though they were like, hey, we're about to break the law and we're not going to do it, even though you ask us to, we still respect who you are and the position that God has put you in, because you're still the king, right? And I think that's amazing, and I think we can translate that also in the fact that when we travel to other lands, or even within the states now, with COVID. Before COVID, I couldn't say this, but now I can. And this is, you have mask mandates in some states and none in the other. And you have to respect some of the mandates here and none of it's kind of, because I lived in Florida before this, and I forgot what a mask was for a while. You know what I mean? And then I come to Colorado, and you need a mask to work out. You need to go get groceries. And it's almost like two different countries at that point, and it's politics aside, but like that's how it feels, so you go to these different places, and you have to respect the mandates and the laws up to a point, which again, I truly believe that's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did, especially by respecting the throne of King Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, and one thing about their time is that the religion that they had was integrated into their laws, and oftentimes integrated into their government. We're pretty strong here in the United States about the separation of church and state, having those things separate. But that wasn't the case back then. In the world that they lived in, oftentimes what they believed influenced the laws that they had. And I think that is a great point that you make, because I've seen people take this story and kind of turn it to try to justify any type of defiance against a government authority, or disrespect against a government authority. And I don't think that's what this story teaches.
Yeah, I don't think so.
because like you said, they showed that respect. They weren't willing to trade their belief and their trust in God for it, but they uh, they were they were as much as possible. They wanted to respect it, and most of us are familiar with Romans 13 and other passages that instruct us on how to deal with government authorities and such, and so we need to be mindful of just how they interacted in this case.
Absolutely.
But a question that we've already talked about a little bit, and we may just touch on a little bit. But do you have any thoughts on what the world was like, during this time, and as these Jewish people lived in exile in Babylon?
Yeah, I mean, as far as my thoughts go on it, it's the being in a foreign land, and like you said, being in exile in Babylon. Like this is such a hard thing to put yourself into, because we can't. I mean, like you said, the most that we can understand is traveling to a foreign land. But even then, we're not in exile. We can go right back home. You know what I mean? Like we can hop on a plane and in the comfort of a plane be totally fine, be served a meal and go back home. And that just wasn't this time period. I mean, when you were cast out, you were cast out, and you had to wander. And hopefully, if you were lucky, you had an animal to ride on. You didn't, you were walking the whole time. I mean, just everything. I mean, and I could get into the fact that they don't have phones. They can't call their loved ones, tell them what's going on. Hey, where are you? Where can we meet up? It doesn't work like that. Even a mail system. I mean, that maybe you had a messenger, but was that messenger part of your country? And will they deliver your message? And will it get there? And will they be able to find who you're getting the message to? I mean, there's a million things that it's just like we cannot truly understand the just the weight that they had on them, and the stress they had on them in that time period. And like you said, the fact that they were actually doing decent in a foreign land, as somewhat officials, as administrative workers, if you will, is incredible, because that truly shouldn't have happened, but yet there it was, and it did, and it worked out. And for them to defy the king even then, after they had the position they did as people who were not of that land, it's like, wow, the faith in God must have been so strong, because not only did they put their lives on the line, I mean, they put their actual physical lives, and I don't mean just like death or life. I mean their jobs, right? Their everything. They could have been tortured. They could have been tortured for years. I mean, there was no protection of rights like we have here in the United States. We always think, well, at least they'll get a lawyer, right? And they'll be able to like maybe take that to court. It doesn't work like that. Like in that time period, the king said, you're dead, and that's it. There's no arguing. There's no nothing. And I think that's just unfathomable to me, because it's just like, we've grown up in a world where we have rights, and where we can say what we want, and we can even protest, and we can all these different things. That time period, it just didn't work like that. It wasn't like that at all.
Yeah, and I think the king mentions that when they come up to him, he says he basically says, I have the authority over life and death over you. What I say goes, and which wasn't really a lie, because that's the way that world worked at that time.
Yeah,
but
and the fact that the king even gave them an option, by the way, which I always found so interesting, is he's like, hey, here's your second chance, by the way. Go ahead, and if you go ahead and do it now, we'll play some music. If you bow down now, well and good, go home, come back to work tomorrow, we're good to go. See y'all at dinner. But instead, like, they still said no. I mean, they had a second chance, which is more than, I mean, most kings would give typically off of their head. They burn, whatever. But he actually gave them a shot, which was, in my mind, a second temptation, because the temptation is cling to life over God, and they still didn't take it.
Yeah, if you know the story, a group of Chaldeans, come up, and they actually approach the king, and then kind of tell him. They say, well, these individuals over here, they're not bowing down, they're not following your instructions. And so the king, he calls them up, and he, like you said, questions them, and they give the same answer, and they don't back down.
Right.
But Easton, when you look at these men, and when you look at this this story, as we've already mentioned, they were not your ordinary person. I would say, if an ordinary person was dropped into that situation, they wouldn't have made the choices that these men made, because this was the oftentimes, like you said, that the temptation is so much is to live to fight another day,
Yeah.
deny now and then maybe you live from later. But that's not the perspective that they had. And so what are some characteristics of these men that we can learn from, that we can take in, that we can use for ourselves here today as Christians?
So there's a saying, and I'm glad that you mentioned the whole "live to fight another day." There's a saying that I feel like we hide behind and we justify it, and we say, well, this is me being strategic in the fight, right? Whether it be for God or for whatever you believe in, it's the fight that you're fighting, and it is that phrase, well, I don't want to die on this hill. This hill is not the hill I will die on, right? I need to climb another hill and die on that hill. Like, this isn't the battle worth dying for. And just like you said here, these men, they could have taken that escape and said, you know what? This isn't the hill we need to die on. We're better off alive, right? Because what if God doesn't save us? So we need to make sure, and like, maybe we'll bow down to this and we'll go preach God's word somewhere else. They didn't do that. They actually just said, you know what? If this is the hill that we're faced with. This is the mountain that we're faced with, and this is the one we're going to die on, right? We're either going to make it to the summit, and God will bless us, or we're going to die here, and God will bless us for taking on that challenge. And they went ahead and did that. So, I want to attribute courage as a characteristic, or even bravery. But once again, I can't help but just say it was trust, and it was trust in God, and it was also wisdom to know, again, what hill to die on. Like we use that phrase all the time. And they didn't hide behind that. Instead, they took it head on and said, no, this is where we go. And as a matter of fact, this is one of my favorite parts of the story, and I gotta tell you this. And this is, I didn't know my grandma was gonna be on here, so I'm gonna say it anyway. I plan on saying this, but this, they say in the story, and if you're not familiar with this, basically they're before the king, and the king's like, hey, here's your second chance. Ready? You got it? And you just bow down. And they say, look, O king, live forever, right? They respect the throne. They're like, look, we get it. But here's the deal. We're not going to bow before your image. Instead, we worship God alone. And that's that. And the king says, well, okay, I have power over you. I can kill you. I can throw you in the furnace. And then what God will save you? And they literally say, they're like, look, we don't have to answer you in this matter. All right. We're not going to argue what God is better and all this stuff, because we believe in our God, the one true God. And he has the power to deliver us from your hand, and he can save us. And then my favorite 3 words, maybe in the whole Bible, it goes, but if not. And that is my favorite thing ever. They say, but if not, if he doesn't save us, if he doesn't do it, we still won't bow before you. We still trust in God over you. And that right there, that character, that trust, the characteristics that I'm kind of attributing to them here is everything, because they said, look, we understand that we may die. God may choose not to save us, but even if he still doesn't choose to save us, we still will not worship you or your image. And this has gotten me through a lot. I'm going to be honest. And this is one of the characteristics of these men that I take very personally. So what I was gonna say is when my grandpa had cancer, and he passed away from cancer, right? And I remember in his last days, I mean, I prayed earnestly. Like I prayed and I begged and I pleaded. I mean, I talked about how, like, you think Paul served you? You just wait. You saved my grandpa. I'll beat Paul, right? I will serve you like crazy. Like you've never seen a servant like me. Just save my grandpa. My grandpa still passed, and this story, this account in the Bible, is one of those that saved me the most, because I thought, you know what? Here I am bargaining with God. I'm begging, I'm pleading. And I have to remember that even if God doesn't answer the prayer the way you want, even if he doesn't save you or save someone else that you love, you still follow him. You don't follow him because he is your servant and does whatever you want. And he's like a slot machine where you pull the lever and, you hope to get a payday every once in a while. It doesn't work like that. It works like you say, look, God has the power to change this life, to save this life, to work whatever I hope he works. But even if he doesn't, I'll still serve him. And this thing gets me through a lot, because we always expect God to do what we ask. And it's like, if he doesn't, does he not love me? Does he not hear me? But that's not how God works. God isn't a genie that you pull up every time you need something. You serve him no matter what.
It is a powerful story, and I think it's a testament, like you said, how Scripture can get you through
Yeah.
some of those tough times. But if we look here, this is the verses that you mentioned in verses 16 down to verse 18, I think, where it says, in reading it, it says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. And if you go down to verse 19, you see how Nebuchadnezzar reacted with this. And it says that he was filled with fury. And it says the expression on his face was changed, and he immediately ordered them into the fiery furnace. And so it is something to look at, when the decision that these men made. And like I said, all the opportunities they had to back out, and they probably had people, maybe urging them, maybe encouraging
Yes.
them, to just bow down, at least look like it, But they,
Yeah.
but they had made their decision before that moment, I believe. Like
Yes.
that wasn't something that they just decided on the spot, but they had made the decision that no matter what, they were not going to serve any other God but the God in heaven. And one of the great lessons that I think we get from this is that their service to God was not seasonal. It wasn't just from the good things. Like I said, even though they were in a foreign land, they were doing very well. They were essentially government officials. They had authority over different places. It was a good life. They had a good life going for them. And but even though God blessed them in such a way, they weren't somebody who served God in the good times, but pushed them off when things got hard, and things got really hard, in this sense, and that they still they still trusted in Him, and like the verse he mentioned where they said but if not, their trust in God wasn't tied to the circumstances around them, no matter how extreme it was. Even if it meant a fiery death, they said if that's it, so be it. If that's a plan God has for us, then let it go. It's a kind of a resignation, I think, to the will of God. It's saying
Yes.
God's going to take care of me, no matter what. Even if my story has some pretty scary moments, if it has some bumps along the way, if it meets an end, such as in a fiery furnace, if that's the plan God has for me, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to walk that road because I know He's got me in the future. It's a wonderful thing to look at. The way that these men acted. But we always want to take a look, at the good things that these people did, and also some of the flaws that they had as well. Although with these men, I don't know. I don't know what you have to say on this next one, but with these men, there is not a whole lot. If you try to look for flaws and you try to look for maybe some negative characteristics that they had, there's not a whole lot there that I can see. But do you have can you see any flaws or any mistakes that they have throughout their story in the Bible?
I don't even know if, and you're right. Like as far as the text goes, I don't know if I can think of anything or I've seen anything that would, stand out as kind of a flaw or something that, they could correct. But knowing that they're human, I think is one of the things that we have to. So I'll be honest, when we read the Bible, and I say when I read the Bible, and I'm sure people can relate to this, sometimes I read it and I read it like, almost like a story like Little Red Riding Hood, right? Where I'm just like, the character is the character. And if I'm not told the thoughts, then they didn't think it, right? If I'm not told the emotions, then they didn't feel it. If I'm not told the actual physical reactions, then they didn't do it. And that's not the case. You know what I mean? Like the Bible gives us the story. Sometimes it gives us the thoughts, but when it doesn't, we have to also remember that they were human. There was nothing mystical about them. There was nothing just crazy like spiritual about them. I mean, Jesus and the apostles, and that's pretty much told to us throughout the Bible as well. But when it comes to just these men, these women throughout the Bible, or they don't necessarily tell us every single thing that they ever thought or felt. And because of that, I would almost say that it would not shock me one day in heaven if I could ask them, if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thought twice about it. You know what I mean? It doesn't say they did it, but I mean, the human reaction to seeing the furnace in front of you, right? It doesn't say that they took them down a chamber or, they walked them a great distance. It's like, as far as they knew, they were as good as dead, and they knew the punishment. The punishment wasn't like, a coin flip. They weren't like, okay, well, if we don't bow down, then we may have to pay a fine. It wasn't like that. It was, if we don't bow down, we will be thrown into the fiery furnace and we will die. And that's as far as we know. God can save us. Doesn't mean he will. We have to assume that this could be death, right? And having said that, in knowing that they were human men, standing before the furnace or even before the king, which would be an awe-inspiring moment in itself. I mean, that's the king. That's the one that has the power over your life at that point. Obviously, aside from God, you can't help but wonder, did they think just for a moment, each one of them, okay, should we do this? Is this something we should? Okay. He's given us one more chance. He said, look, I'll play some music right now. You can bow and well and good. You can go home. It's fine. You can't help but wonder, did they think that? I'm not saying they did. I'm just saying, knowing that they're human, you have to kind of wonder, what were their thoughts at that point? They obviously made the right call. I mean, the Bible makes that very clear. They were righteous in the sight of God because God saved them. He sent an angel in the fiery furnace to save them. So they clearly made the right choice. It makes you wonder, what did they think? Right at that one point, what went through their minds? Because I can promise you, in my head, if I said, okay, no, I'm not going to do this, and some official said, all right, hey, we're heating up a furnace. There's the furnace right there. It's flaming hot. It will kill you. And I'm looking at the furnace. I can't lie. In my head, I might be like, oh, is this something I need to do? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing right now? Maybe I won't. Maybe I won't. Maybe God wants me somewhere else. Maybe God wants me in another country right now. Like all these justifying thoughts, you can't help but wonder if they may have thought that. And again, this is all just speculation, but they were human. So to think that they were just totally like, nope, we're ready. Let's do it. Let's just, and no emotion. That's not realistic.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, because you think about what the Bible is. It's not a storybook. It's not something that is a fictional story. This is a recounting of things that actually happened, of real people, with these genuine experiences. And we know what real people are like. They're not robots. What we go through and how we operate. They're sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's complicated. It's not. It's almost never just straightforward.
Right.
And so like you said, they probably had some some doubts about going forward.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly
human.
Perfectly understandable. Yeah. It's human. And we do have, I'm guilty of this, just as much as anybody. We do have a way of sometimes trying to seek ways to justify, the harder road, the more difficult road. Like we might see that God's leading us down some way, and it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult. It's easy for me sometimes to justify reasons, not to do that, or not to go down that road. But they no matter what the cost, even if it cost them everything, they were willing to. They were all in. Like there was no safety net. There was no something that, for all they knew, nobody was going to save them. But yet they were all in. And like I said, they were government officials. They knew exactly what was going to happen if someone defied the king. They probably seen it, several times before of other individuals who had defied him. And they may have remembered, what happened when the army of Babylon, came against Israel. And so they knew that, this fiery furnace was to make an example of people, and they were going to be that example if they had that trust. But yet, they continue to do that, which is remarkable. But, like you said, it's important to remember these were real people who had these experiences, and their great accomplishments doesn't detract from that fact.
Yep.
But as we kind of end up wrapping up the story and wrapping up our discussion on this, what are some applications? What are some lessons that we can take from the story? I know we've covered several already, but is there anything else that maybe we can take from the story and maybe talk a little bit about the ending of the story?
Yeah.
What happens after they go into this fiery furnace. But what are some lessons that kind of speak to you from the story?
Yeah, so taking what was already said, and they are cast into the furnace, and even the flames engulfed the guards as they were taking them. That's how hot the furnace was, because the king was so mad. He said heated up 7 times hotter. I mean, it wasn't just death. It was anger that the king was sentencing them. I mean, he was angry. He was furious. I mean, there was no, death wasn't enough. They needed to burn and be ash and be nothing. Which, I mean, that's some pretty deep hatred. You know what I mean? Like to wish that on anyone. And in the story, they in the account, really, the guards burn up as they bring them close to the furnace, and the king ends up noticing, wait a minute, didn't I throw 3 people? There's 4 people, and he commands them to come out. And as the story wraps up, there's no harm, not even a small singe, not a hair singe, nothing. I mean, everything and their clothing, there's not even a burnt smell on them. I mean, that's how it's almost as if they never even have seen a fire in their life. Like, they were totally fine. And the king, of course, then promotes them, glorifies God, makes a decree that no one else, worships anyone else but the true God. And it's this beautiful ending to this story. And that's almost the reason that I don't I haven't focused too much on that part, because everyone remembers that. That's the theatrical, holy cow, there's a furnace, they're okay, there's 4 people in there, there's clearly an angel or the son of God, the king says a son of the gods, because in his mind it's one of the gods, and they're saving them, but he ends up coming to the conclusion, never mind, it's the true God. And all of that to say, it's easy to look at that and be like, oh my gosh, wow, I can fight anything, this is incredible, this is amazing. The reason that I focus so much on the but if not part is because that is closer to when you talk about application to our life. Again, we're not facing a fiery furnace. You can use a metaphor and say, what is your fiery furnace? But the truth is, most of us, if not all of us, will never come to a threat that severe. More than likely, it's going to be tiny challenges that we equate to big challenges in our life. Are we going to stand up for God? Are we going to be soldiers for God? Are we going to stand up on God's behalf? Right? While God is the king, and he sits on his throne, I mean, we're the speaker, right? We're the messenger. And so will we speak on God's behalf, or will we be silent in the face of fear? And that is the application I can't stress enough, especially if I can leave one seed of wisdom, or not even wisdom, but just kind of encouragement, I should say, to anyone listening. That is, God is not a genie. He is not, a slot machine. He is not just someone you kind of go to whenever you need something. It's not like that. It's God is king, and you live for God. You either do, you don't, right? There's do or do not. There's no try. Someone wise said that one time. So, it's about that but if not statement for me. It is when you're faced with something and you say, okay, I know the right thing to do, and the right thing to do may cost me, let's say, my job, my relationships, even sometimes my family. The right thing to do, the right thing to say may cost me dearly. It may not be your life, right? Because we don't face that, like I said, like they did. But you have to ask yourself the question, will you stand up for God, even if God does not deliver you from that situation? Because God can. It's about knowing God can save me. But even if he doesn't, I will still follow him. And even if I am homeless and have nothing left, I still will worship God, and I will stick with him to the end. And I think that's the message of this story. Again, we focus a lot on the theatrics sometimes and the fiery furnace. But truthfully, it's that moment where they said, no, we're standing for God. Even if he doesn't deliver us, God is our God, and that's it.
And that's a reaction that some people have sometimes. When unfortunately we know that life in itself it can be tough. People go through sometimes a lot more than you see on the outside. Everyone has their struggles that they go through, and life can be tough sometimes, and we do have those challenges. And sometimes the instinct that we can have is to kind of lash out at God and say and maybe kind of question the love of God because of these things are happening to us. But we know that God watched over these men. We know that He was there with these men. We know that from the ending of the story we know that He protected these men. But they still went to the furnace. They still got thrown into the furnace. Even up to the point, we don't, like I said, we don't know the mindset of these people, but even up to the point where they were on the edge of that furnace, they may have not have known that they were going to be saved. But they, like I said, they knew that there was going to be a cost to their faithfulness, and they were willing to pay it. And Jesus speaks on that, several times, throughout His ministry, that there's going to be a cost to being a Christian. And if you're going to have to be willing to pay it, if you're going to be a faithful, Christian. And sometimes it's like you said, it's a variety of situations and different things that can be that cost. Like we don't have to, thankfully in our country, we don't have to think about giving up our life, at times. But there's a lot of things that can be a cost for our faith. But they were willing to pay that, and God, we know He protected them. But one thing that I always find interesting, like when we read the story, is found in verse 28. Like we know his attitude towards God beforehand. He says, what gods is going to save you from my hand? Who is going to save you from my ultimate authority? And then we get here to verse 28, and when he sees them come out of the fire, and they're not affected, they're not burned, they're not their hair is not singed. Verse 28, it says, Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and set aside the king's command, and yielded up their bodies rather than service and worship any god except their own God. That's the reaction that he had to what these men did, and to the protection and the might that God displayed. And I think that's a reaction that is appropriate. It's a reaction that I think maybe we should all have when we sit and truly think about what God has done and how He has affected our life. Blessed be the God, who created this earth, who gave me, what I had, who made me, at who I am. Blessed, be Him. That's it's interesting to see His reaction, and we know from, if you read the next chapter in Daniel, we know this is not something that sticks. He kind of gets caught up in himself, again. But it's when we truly think about the goodness of what God shows and what He has displayed in our life, I think this is a reaction that we can have. And we know there's no other God, but He's the only one that we can serve. But
that's absolutely right.
But Easton, we appreciate you being here tonight. We're going to kind of wind down here. But if someone wants to get in contact with you, if they want to hear more of your content, where can they go to find it?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, Easton Explores. That's my Instagram handle, at Easton Explores. You can go to my YouTube channel, just Easton Cook. You can connect with me there. And then obviously my podcast, it's in just about anywhere you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts. You can go to Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, all these different things. But it's Everything with Easton. And obviously Facebook, Easton Cook. You can connect with me there. And please, if you ever have any type of questions, or you have any kind of basically just want to have a conversation or just talk about life in general, by all means, hit me up anywhere. And I mean that genuinely. I envy Seth in this, that I'm not preaching anymore, and I know he's getting to do that. And I think it's amazing. And so any opportunity I have to take anything that I may have learned or that I'm studying currently, and just talk about it and also refine it for myself, I take, by all means, because iron sharpens iron. So by all means, please hit me up. I'd love that.
It does indeed. We appreciate you taking your time and taking the effort to study this
Yeah.
passage and give us your perspective. And we wish you the very best, and we hope that hope that you can do some great things in the future.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Seth. I appreciate it, and thank you.
And go Dolphins.
Go Dolphins, fins up.
We hope that you've enjoyed this episode. We hope that you will join us next Thursday for another edition of the Midweek Bible Study. We're here every Thursday night at 7 o'clock. And so we hope that this is something that can increase your faith, that can help you in your own study of the Word of God. But until next time, we hope you go out and be the light of the world. And we hope that you glorify God in everything that you do. We'll see you next time.